Do you want to see the best teeth in the world? Learn about the girl locked in and then rescued from a safe? Or maybe experience whatever this terrifying thing is? These are all old newspaper stories I found while researching daily history shorts. Here's those stories and all the others I found for July 1925. July 1st, 1925. Be self when rich, Fay King warns. Those were happy days when I worked in the beanery. She says self-made women should be proud and never be ashamed of her humble beginnings. By Fay King. A lot of times we read about banquets where successful and rich men gather to remember the days when they were newsies and messenger boys. The man who has managed to rise in the world from humble surroundings and extreme poverty seems only too happy to confess to the world at large his struggles and humble beginnings, thereby giving inspiration and urge to other lads of the present generation. Once, some very prominent citizens in a certain town took their old stands and sold newspapers for the benefit of the Newsboys Fund, and seemed to get a heap of fun calling off the familiar editions of the old days. I wonder if women could do that. I do remember one dancer who made a great success in New York. When she came back to San Francisco, which was her hometown, she was very happy to go back to the little barber shop where she used to manicure and had her picture taken sitting at the chair she formerly used, surrounded by some of the boys who were still in the shop. Great stuff, say I. Contrasting this regular person, I recall a man out west who made a great fortune. His new wealth and luxurious surroundings never changed him a bit, and he was never happier than when he gathered the old gang together and talked over the old lean days. I went to his house one day with some of his old pals, and he welcomed us cordially, but what a withering person his wife was, such airs. It turned out that she was his stenographer in the little shack of an office he had before his luck changed. And just to think how she took on when we mentioned typewriters, as if they were in a class with caterpillars. That's what disgusts me with some women. Why didn't she act human? Being a stenographer was a credit to her. Why act as if she were ashamed? That's why I wonder if woman will ever get to the place where she can line up at a banquet and admit that she worked hard at humble toil until she married into wealth, or social position, or achieved fame and fortune. Whether a woman marries into or works her way up to a better position in life, she should never be ashamed of her humble beginning. A self-made woman should be as proud as a self-made man. July 2nd, 1925. Battles policeman in darkened cellar. Arch Street storekeeper subdued after biting raider. Staging a one-man raid last night, Patrolman Thomas Lee encountered a stiff battle but finally succeeded in seizing a considerable quantity of evidence and arresting Luis Petrozello of Arch Street on charges of violating the liquor laws. Attorney Alfred Lewitt represented Petrozello in police court this morning, and the case was continued until Monday morning for trial. Petrozello conducts a store at the Arch Street address and has been convicted twice before this year for violating the liquor laws. On January 26, he was fined $150 and costs, and on April 18 he was fined $200 and costs and sentenced to jail for 20 days. Bonds for his release, pending hearing Monday, were set at $500 at the request of prosecutor Joseph G. Woods. Patrolman Lee entered the store after his suspicions were aroused by the actions of Petrozello, and went to the cellar with the storekeeper. When the two arrived in the cellar, the lights mysteriously went out, and Petrozello attacked the policeman, giving his hand a severe bite during the scuffle. Lee finally subdued the man, and then, on searching the cellar, he uncovered a number of bottles and jugs containing liquor. A charge of resistance was also lodged against the prisoner. July 3rd, 1925. Busiest woman in 48 states found in Florida town. Louise D. Hance. Said to be the busiest woman in the United States, She is head of the St. Petersburg, Florida Academy of Dancing and owns a detective agency and a police patrol of more than a dozen men and women besides her job as deputy sheriff. Her raids have been the downfall of many a bootlegger. She is a notary public and a dealer in real estate. She is the mother of a 15-year-old son and attends to her housework. Policeman is also good wrestler. Patrolman George Prindle. Folks who attend the 4th of July celebration at the state fairground, when police and firemen will frolic, will realise why crooks have a tough time on their hands when they encounter Patrolman George Prindle. Before becoming a member of the department, Prindle was a professional wrestler of no mean ability. When on duty in District 48, Prindle has an opportunity to demonstrate his strength. Many of the arrests in that district, bounded by Meridian, McCarty and Morris Streets and White River, are of the type that require physical effort. Prindle was appointed to the department February 26, 1924, and lives at New York Street. July 4th, 1925. 50 special rooms for Longfellows in Gotham Hotel. New York. The Hotel McAlpin Thursday made the announcement for which a large populace has waited and hoped since that day 20 years ago when Kansas decreed hotel bedsheets must be 9 feet long. It is converting part of its 22nd floor into special accommodations for tall persons. The hotel will proffer an asylum for 50 oversized, overstuffed, or overwhelming guests who, for the first time in their lives, will not feel like Gullivers in Lilliput. Persons 6 and 7 feet tall will enter these rooms, Arthur L. Lee, hotel manager, said, upright and unafraid. They will sit on chairs that meet them halfway, bathe in tubs with their knees underwater, comb their hair and struggle with their cravats without kneeling before dresser mirrors, and stretch out for sleep no longer diagonally, but in a literal plethora of bed, 7 or 8 feet long. Won't try again. 4th was enough. After a legal tilt with her 4th husband, Mrs. Rose Crawford, Los Angeles, states she doesn't believe in the adage about try again if you don't succeed at first. July 5th. 1925. Plucky girls foil thieves' attempt to drive off auto. Jumps in cars and catch 3 fleeing youths in wild chase. Pluck and quick thinking on the part of Miss Elsa Haas of R Street Northwest and a party of girlfriends saved a high-priced new touring car and caused the arrest of 3 Baltimore youths who were trying to take the automobile to Baltimore on a joyride yesterday. According to the police in Sub T Station, the car was parked outside the R Street residence when the girls saw the 3 men get in and drive away. Thinking quickly, the girls dashed out of the house into 2 cars parked in front and gave chase. Following closely, the 2 carloads of girls chased the 3 men as far as Connecticut Avenue and Woodley Road, where 1 carload of girls stopped and picked up policeman R.D. Paget, who was on crossing duty. The other car sped ahead, and catching up with the fugitives, forced them to one side of the road, where they came to a standstill. Officer Paget and the other girls came up immediately, and the policeman arrested the youths. Ralph Norden, 19, chauffeur, Maryland Street, Norman Steisler, 24, clerk, John Street, and Philip Acker, 20, paperhanger, John Street, all of Baltimore, were arrested for joyriding. The youths admitted that they were on the way to Baltimore with the stolen car. They were locked up at number 7 precinct and the car was turned over to John I. Haas, owner of the car. July 6th, 1925. Will cut safe if Raffles fails. Acetylene torches to be in readiness in front of Hearst Building. Will she smother to death if Raffles fails to open the safe? While this question is flashing through hundreds of minds tomorrow, Raffles, the cracksman, star safe opener, will pit his skill against an airtight steel safe in which has been locked Miss Babe Belmont, vaudeville artist. The demonstration of Raffles' ability to open any safe, no matter how strongly made, will be given tomorrow at 12:15 p.m. in front of the Hearst building. Raffles is this week playing at the Earl Theatre in an act entitled Cheating the Grave. A large safe, donated for the occasion by the Shaw Walker Company, will be mounted on a motor truck parked in front of the Hearst building tomorrow. Miss Belmont will crawl within the steel vault. The door will be closed, and several prominent Washington businessmen will turn the knob, assuring themselves that the safe really is securely locked. Then Raffles, the cracksman, will rub his fingertips in the approved manner. He will whirl the dial until his sensitive finger nerves feel the click of the lock. Raffles expects to release Miss Belmont inside of 3 minutes. This safe, however, may be too much for the ingenuity of the cracksman. If he does not succeed in locating the combination in 3 minutes, acetylene torches will be used to drill open the safe and release the imprisoned girl. A physician will be on hand to resuscitate Miss Belmont in event of any accident, and she will be rushed to George Washington University Hospital, a few feet away. It's going to be a big show, and it's free to all who gather at noon tomorrow in front of the Hearst building. July 7th, 1925. Raffles frees girl from safe. Earl Theatre stars thrill crowd gathered in front of Hearst building. Before a thrilled crowd of hundreds in front of the Hearst building today at 12:15 o'clock, Raffles the Cracksman, headliner at the Earl Theatre this week, liberated Miss Babe Belmont from a locked safe in a little over 1 minute. The safe, donated for the occasion by the Shaw Walker Company, was placed at the entrance to the building. Its combination was unknown to Raffles, and a representative of the company stood nearby to use his knowledge if the cracksman's skill failed. Previous to the demonstration, Raffles addressed the crowd, stating that his method of opening safes could be applied to any, and he offered to call at the establishment of any businessman in the audience between 12 and 1 o'clock tomorrow and again prove his ability. Pretty Miss Belmont then entered the safe, and the heavy door was swung shut. A committee turned the knob and tested the lock to ascertain that the guarding tumblers were in place. Raffles then donned a black blindfold, rubbed sandpaper in his sensitive forefinger and middle finger to ensure a delicate touch, and, with his back to the safe and his hands behind him on the knob, went to work. The crowd waited breathless as the cracksman again used the sandpaper. His fingers, turning the knob, told him when each tumbler fell. At the expiration of 70 seconds, Raffles took off his blindfold, turned, and easily opened the safe. Amid applause, Miss Belmont emerged a little warm, but otherwise no worse for the dangerous experience. July 8th, 1925. The Worst Story I Have Heard Today by Will Rogers. The worst story I heard today was told to me by a man that you would think knew enough not to waste his valuable time by repeating such a thing. He is a man that you have always, up to now, associated with intelligence and good sense. It was Rex Beach, the author. I don't just remember now what he was the author of, but I know he is always spoken of as an author. I think it was North of 36. Because I've heard he was in the Klondike. Well, I made one of Rex's stories into a picture once. It was Laughing Bill Hyde, and I think he told me this story to get even with me for that. If he did, he did. Rex is the only author that after reading one of his big outdoor stories, you meet him and find he is just what you would want to imagine him. Nothing anemic about that bird. Well, Rex writes 1 month and fishes the other 11. He must tell me a fishing story. I hate fishing stories. I even hate fishing, and I am not so crazy about even fish after they are caught. However, Jock McTavish and 2 English friends were out fishing, and it was understood that the first man to catch a fish would stand treat at the inn. As Jock was known to be the best fisherman thereabouts, his friends told him he had made a bad bargain, that he was sure to lose the bet, as he would be certain to catch the first fish. Yes, says Jock, but I am not going to put any bait on my hook. If I ever see Rex Beach with another one of those Scotch fishing stories, you will be reading the following headline in the paper. He will be best remembered by his book, The Spoilers. July 9th, 1925. defends modern youth. Assistant Attorney General thinks boys and girls are improving. The new youth of America, regardless of its tendency to disregard the narrow path laid down for boys and girls of yesterday, finds a staunch supporter in Mrs. Mabel Walker Wilbrandt, Assistant Attorney General of the United States. Casting into the discard the gloomy view of the future mothers and fathers of the country held by many, Mrs. Wilbrandt, in an interview today, expressed the opinion that while boys and girls are breaking a lot of precedents, they are as well equipped for problems of tomorrow as were their parents. Considering the multitude of temptations which beset the youth of today, immorality and crime is on the decrease rather than increase, Mrs. Wilbrandt said. This clearly indicates a higher curve of resistance to temptation. The girl of the new generation, the so-called flapper, was held to have as much common sense as the demure, blushing maiden of yesterday. She is believed by Mrs. Wilbrandt to be much better equipped to take care of herself in the new civilization where women are taking their places with men in commerce, industry and public life. Mrs. Wilbrandt, who has made a careful study of the underlying causes for delinquency, looks to improved home conditions and a more wholesome educational system to bring about a check in crime among boys and girls and to establish in youth a better understanding of its responsibilities to society. Wholesome recreation in the educational systems, playground work, physical training, and the increasing effort of educators to supply in the schools an antidote for the misunderstanding existing in many homes will work toward improved standards for boys and girls, according to Mrs. Wilbrandt. Department of Justice crime experts find that the spirit of adventure is responsible for many young people sticking in a mire from which they cannot rise. Lust for wealth was given as another primary cause for youthful crime. July 10th, 1925. Bible read in 71 hours. 45 participate in relay contest at Akron, Ohio. At 7:52 o'clock Wednesday night, Reverend W. M. Newman, pastor of Madison Avenue Evangelical Church, read aloud the final verse in the book of Revelations, and Akron's first public relay reading of the Bible was at an end, 71 hours 27 minutes after it started. 45 readers participated in the contest. They divided their time into 170 periods, averaging 24 minutes each. July 11th, 1925. Faye King says pretty girls are plenty. Follies has no corner on them, as beauties are to be found most everywhere. The Broadway shows, Fifth Avenue and the smart tea rooms haven't cornered the beauty of New York. The connoisseur of classy dames can take a hike down to the Battery or up to the Bronx, take a squint at Brooklyn and tube over to Jersey, and he will find that good lookers are everywhere. When the sightseer wants to concentrate upon glorified girlhood, he breaks a case note and gets a seat down front at the Follies, or he anchors through the lobby of some swell hotel, or anchors on a curb in the shopping district. But he'd have just as good luck when it comes to lookers if he toured an office building, or tried some of the lunchrooms in the financial district. Movie pictures, artistic magazines, hints to beauty in the daily paper, and car signs have handed out enough hows to give every girl a chance to be as beautiful as the blonde in the picture. Brunettes are by no means outlawed in the race for looks, and mere man is bound to get an eyeful whether he prefers the blue-eyed baby with the sun-kissed dome or the dark-eyed damsel with the lacquered orb. It is true, of course, that the silken drop curtain and the studied lighting effects have a way of concentrating upon the beauties who promenade the footlights, and the soft swinging tunes of the orchestra perfect the mood for appreciating them. But even the drab backgrounds of business files and office furniture cannot dim the personality and pettiness of the business girls. The starched shirtwaist and sombre tie, the shiny nose and uncurled hair are no longer looked upon as earmarks of efficiency. One has only to lamp the busy fingers of the bob-haired little beauty at her typewriter desk to see that in spite of her attractive appearance, she can keep her mind on her work and turn out good stuff as the woman who effaced herself from the picture and was a sort of living piece of machinery. I recommend the noon hour in any part of the city as an excellent time for a visitor to our shores to have a look at the typical American girl. July 12th, 1925. Woman who saw end of world in divorce suit. Mrs. Rowan blamed by Frey for losing his wife. The name of Mrs. Margaret Rowan, a Hollywood cult leader, whose prediction of the coming of the end of the world last February 6 sent many of her disciples to hilltops throughout the country on that date, today was brought into a divorce suit here. Herman F. Frey filed a plea for divorce from his wife, Emma, on the ground that she had tried to make him a disciple of Mrs. Rowan, had forced him to stop work on Saturdays, which cost him his job, and then had left him to live with Mrs. Rowan. July 13th, 1925. Uncle Sam's Place Saloon, operated by Asher and Aid, cleans up rivals. A clever scheme for obtaining evidence against rum runners and dealers has resulted in wholesale arrests here. 170 persons have been taken into custody since Saturday by 40 prohibition agents under the direction of J.E. Asher and Max Hartzig of Washington, D.C. Asher and Hartzig came to Peoria 2 months ago and bought a saloon. On the front, in large letters, they placed a sign which read, Uncle Sam's Place. The sign caused considerable amusement among the bootleggers, who soon became acquainted with the newcomers. After winning the confidence of all the illicit rum dealers, Asher and Hartzig began making purchases off runners and dealers and got evidence on practically every saloon in town because of their acquaintance with other bootleggers. The cleanup started Saturday morning when Uncle Sam's Place closed and the proprietors went to the federal building to meet 40 prohibition agents who arrived from Chicago and Washington. One after another, the raids were staged until 100 had been arrested by midnight Saturday. July 14th, 1925. Her teeth judged best in world. Miss Boltea Rawlings, Baltimore girl, who is ready to match her molars with those of any girl in the country. Dental experts have declared her teeth the prettiest and most perfect they have ever seen. She was chosen as owner of the best teeth after a thorough test made throughout the East. Miss Rawlings may well smile. Flapper Fanny says, a girl with presence of matter has birthdays. One with presence of mind has none. July 15th, 1925. Flirtation is costly. Alleged short change artist caught at LaPorte. Flirtation with a woman bank teller whom he is alleged to have tricked out of $50 a few minutes before led to the arrest of George T. Stone of Columbus, Ohio, alleged short change artist, on a grand larceny charge. He is said to be wanted in other Indiana cities on similar charges. July 16th, 1925. Loving ex-clergyman again shot by Cupid. Wilson Culp of South Bend, twice taken back by wife, leaves once more. Wilson Culp, former Ohio pastor, still is a most ardent lover. Again, the pastor, who has twice deserted his wife and 9 children, only to be forgiven each time, has left his family and is believed by his wife to have left home for Mrs. Dorothy Culp, a sister-in-law of Napanee, Indiana, who disappeared at the same time as did Mr. Culp. It is the second time they have deserted their households in favour of each other. Last spring, they cast their lot together, only to break up when Mrs. Wilson Culp got a warrant charging non-support. When the latter refused to prosecute, each returned to their homes asking forgiveness. Their requests were granted and each promised not to err again. However, they are believed to have broken their promise and Mrs. Wilson Culp believes they have fled to Mexico. On a previous occasion, when Mr. Culp was in charge of a church in Ohio, he is said to have ran off with a choir singer, only to be returned and sentenced to an Ohio workhouse on a charge of non-support. A similar charge is now pending as the result of a warrant obtained yesterday by Mrs. Wilson Culp. July 17th, 1925. Young groom sent to county roads to complete term. After being sentenced to pay a fine of $100 and to serve 12 months at hard labour for petty larceny in the county court here on August 28, 1919, Raymond Fowler escaped from the chain gang when he lacked only 62 days of completing his term. He went to Chattanooga, where he secured a good job, and shortly afterwards joined the church. He came to Gadsden and married the girl of his choice, and they had purchased a lot and were assembling lumber for a new home when somebody informed local authorities of his whereabout. He is now back on the chain gang. In a pathetic letter to a newspaper Thursday, he asked the people of the county to help him secure a pardon. He declared he committed the crime when only 19 years old and at the suggestion of a grown man. "I have proved my worthiness in Chattanooga," Fowler writes, "and I have made good. Don't you folks believe that I deserve a chance to continue my life as a Christian, or should I be thrown back where one loses all self-respect? It is said efforts are being made to secure a parole for the young man." July 18th, 1925. Cash's Civil War Bill, the Old South Echoes. An echo of the old days in the South echoed and echoed into quite a reverberation when a $5 bill of the Confederate States of America was passed for its face value Friday at the corner market, 1st Avenue and Union Street. After first attempting to pass a $10 bill of the same issue, the owner of the worthless currency finally induced Miss Hedvig Garish at a delicatessen counter to accept the $5 bill for a small purchase. "Can't you read?" he asked harshly when she remonstrated about the peculiar appearance of the bill. "See, there it says $5. Now hurry up and give me my change." Not wanting to provoke the customer further, she complied. Becoming more suspicious, she finally asked a nearby clerk, and after a glance he told her that the bill was of no value. Police questioned a man outside the shop that Miss Garish asserted was the offender, but released him. July 19th, 1925. Paris lunatic stalks streets claiming to be ape's descendant. "I'm the man that descended from the monkey," chattered a man walking on all fours in a crowded business street of Paris today when a policeman questioned him. He refused to walk normally and was taken in a taxi cab to a police station, where it was found he was the chief administrative officer of an insane asylum in the Ornay department. Too close association with his charges, and not the reading of the daily reports from the evolution trial at Dayton, Tennessee, is believed to be the cause of his condition. July 20th, 1925. Says we are dumb. Professor shows ratio of educated people remains same. Have we, the citizens of the United States, progressed intellectually during the last 150 years? Or are we still as dumb as we were then, back in the days of George Washington? Without palliating sophism, Professor M.W. Jernigan of the Northwestern University says, "We are as dumb as we ever were." He backs up the statement with a mass of forbidding statistics. "It is a matter of great concern," he aversed, "that there has been no increase in the proportion of highly educated men from the standpoint of expert knowledge and intellectual capacity in the United States Senate during those 150 years of American history." Professor Jernigan compared the ratio of educated leaders in the Second Continental Congress, 1775 to 76, and the Senate 1914 to 24, and showed that 45% were college graduates in both cases. July 21st, 1925. Court ladies given liberty in Japan. By order of the Empress, 250 court ladies of the Japanese imperial menage are to be accorded a degree of liberty hitherto denied them. They are to be allowed 2 days a month to which they may leave the imperial palace grounds and mingle with the busy life of the city. Time-honoured tradition of the court prescribes that the court ladies shall not leave the palace grounds or have any contact with the outside world from the time they enter the service of the Empress. This rule, hitherto, has been rigidly enforced. The Empress, however, is in sympathy with the developments of modern times and is understood to have given the chief court lady, Chiguwa, an order granting the birds in the gilded cage a monthly breath of freedom. July 22nd, 1925. 4 members of Last Man's Club wait to drink rare old wine. 3 tottering old men gathered around a bottle of Burgundy yesterday, marking time. The one who lives longest may quaff the wine. Token of the Last Man's Club, the old bottle with its ruddy contents was taken from its cherrywood case in the bank vault today to grace the 41st annual banquet of the club. Only 4 members remain of the 33 who sat at the first banquet of the Last Man's Club. All were survivors of the Battle of Bull Run, and this date commemorates the struggles. They were members of B Company, 1st Minnesota Infantry. Every year since the club was organised, its members have met here to eat, drink and be merry, with little thought of the morrow. But each year, almost, the number has dwindled. Each year, there were more vacant chairs. Yesterday, only 3 were here. The 4th survivor is confined to a wheelchair. July 23rd, 1925. Telegraphed picture leads to man's arrest. Walter D. Studer, who left here today in custody of Detective Sergeant Joseph Stanley for Louisville, Kentucky, to answer a charge of embezzlement, is believed to be the first man to be arrested here through the use of telegraphed photography. Studer is charged with embezzling $6,000 from the Credit Clearinghouse Adjustment Company of Louisville. News reached the Kentucky city that he was on his way to New Orleans, where it was believed he intended to take ship for South America. The photograph was wired from a Louisville paper to the Birmingham News. The News put it on a fast train for New Orleans. The arrest of Studer by local detectives followed. July 24th, 1925. Golfer's honeymoon bliss marred by police visit. The honeymoon of Frank McKendrick, young professional golfer, was rudely interrupted at a fashionable Broadway hotel today when he was arrested at the request of Buffalo authorities, who wired that a charge of grand larceny had been preferred against him there. McKendrick said that perhaps he had been careless in leaving the Hotel Lafayette in Buffalo without paying my bill. Shortly after McKendrick was taken into custody, New York police said they had been informed that the golfer was also being sought by a detective agency on a charge preferred in Tampa, Florida. McKendrick formerly lived in Tampa and at one time caddied there. July 25th, 1925. Inventor wearing his noise insulator. Hugo Gernsback of New York, wearing what he calls his isolator, an invention that kills noise, that infernal racket in the shop, office or street. Noises jar on the nerves, thus affecting the entire body. This device, which is somewhat extreme, yet very practical, would eliminate all such disturbances. The helmet is provided with an oxygen tank and tube through which the wearer breathes. July 26th, 1925. The fairest flower on island. In a beauty contest held at Coney Island, New York, Miss Catherine Ray was chosen to be Miss Coney Island in the Atlantic City beauty pageant. Left to right, Miss Marcella Miller, who won second award, Miss Catherine Ray, the winner, and Miss Marguerite Young, third. July 27th, 1925. Toes are detectives. Bathers step on sunshades blown away in storm. Bathers' toes were detectives that located sunshades for swimmers at the Wharfley Municipal Beach, which had been blown away in recent storms. Attendants fished the shades out of the river after they had been stepped upon. Saturday's tempest worked havoc with dressing tents at the beach, but they have been raised again and are ready for occupancy, according to Edward E. McBride, Recreation Director. July 28th, 1925. McQuillan, wife, and the other woman. Hugh McQuillan, star pitcher for the New York Giants, with his wife, who has started suit for separation. Mrs. McQuillan names Miss Helene Goebel, Bronx Beauty Contest winner, in her proceedings. Iced shoes for men, dual garters girls. Double garters and iced shoes are the latest brainstorms induced by the London heatwave. 2 garters are worn on each leg, one above the knee, the other below, both different and of extremely colourful design. Since all fashionable women in London are wearing skirts a fraction below the kneecap, 2 of the garters are intended for the public eye. Aluminium shoe trees, hollowed in the centre and filled with ice, will soon be seen in London as a superior luxury for the stylish man. July 29th, 1925. Girls of Canada prefer own men to Europe's best. Time was when the girls of Canada idolised European men, but now they are satisfied that the boys of Canada are better than the best Europe has to offer. So say the 180 Canadian girl students who are in Paris under the auspices of the Overseas Education League. The young ladies were entertained last night as special guests at a grand ball in the palatial former residence of Solomon Rothschild, now used by the Rothschild Foundation. July 30th, 1925. Trotsky predicts world revolution. The United States is driving England to revolution, which eventually will engulf America as well, declares Leon Trotsky, the one-time co-ruler of Soviet Russia with Lenin, who is now returning to power in Moscow after a period of exile. Trotsky makes the statement in a special introduction for the American edition of his new book, Whither Goeth England, of which I have just obtained an advance copy. New York, and not Moscow, is driving England to revolution, Trotsky declares. The Communist Internationale now is a conservative organisation compared with the New York Stock Exchange. The book itself predicts a revolution in England and lays the responsibility for the upheaval at the door of the United States. J.P. Morgan, Charles G. Dawes, and Julius Barnes, former president of the United States Chamber of Commerce and US Wheat Director after the war, are the blacksmiths who are forging the European Revolution, Trotsky continues. The powerful world pressure of the United States is continually making the position of British industry, commerce, finance, and diplomacy impossible. The world position of the United States, as well as the United States foreign debt policy, are reducing Europe to poverty, whence revolution will come. July 31st, 1925. Man to serve day for each cigar he stole. Earl Rausenberg's insatiable craving for cigars and cigarettes resulted in his being burned up in the District Supreme Court yesterday, when Justice Siddons in Criminal Division No. 2 sentenced him to serve 3 years in jail. Rausenberg was convicted of entering a lunchroom where he was employed and pilfering 50 cigars, 160 packages of cigarettes, and a small sum of money. The young man must serve nearly 1,000 days, or 1 for each of the cigars and cigarettes which he pilfered. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you thought in the comments, and please also consider watching another one of my videos. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.